Good morning. When I retired from the university in 2016, I gave myself a new treat, my favorite treat. Since I didn't have to be anywhere in the morning, let alone take a shower to go there, I would get up and I would pour a cup of coffee and I would hop back in bed and very slowly, deliciously read the Washington Post. Sometimes it went on for 3 cups of coffee, at which point Anne would come in and look at her watch and say, are we getting up today? It was heavenly. But you know, it was 2016, and then it was 2017 and 18 and 19 and so on and so forth. And the newspaper was routinely filled with such horrors that I wasn't sure my morning treat was much of a treat. Frankly, I was just so angry most mornings. Bans on Muslims trying to reach the United States, families separated and children in cages at our border, violent anti-Semitic attacks on synagogues, the burning of Black churches, a seemingly endless string of murders of Black people by the police, the depraved indifference towards the lives of Indigenous peoples here, and one mass shooting after another. After time, I guess you could say that I was constantly full of rage at my morning treats. Kayla, I remember at one point suggested that perhaps I want to read a book. Until I read Valarie Kaur's chapter on rage, it would never have occurred to me to ask what it is that I meant when I said I was constantly full of rage. What did I mean by that? My so-called rage didn't mean that I had uncontrollable outbursts of violent anger. I may have thrown a slipper at the wall or two, but that is as far as it went. But uncontrollable outbursts of violent anger is pretty much the dictionary definition of rage. And actual rage, the real deal, is scary, isn't it? None of us would want to be on the receiving end of it, though some of us, I am sure, have experienced it. No. Rage is something that most of us think should be locked away in a fireproof box and tucked where no one can see it. Good Christians find rage to be the very opposite of what we proclaim, God's love. But is that true? Is that really true? I have to tell you that Kaur in this chapter offers what I think is the most complex meditation on rage that I have ever read. And I'm going to have to take some time and explain what she says because they go in several directions. The first is a personal direction. If you've read the 4th chapter of her book, you know that it is harrowing reading. In it, Kaur relates 2 personal experiences, both of which had devastating effects on her mental and physical state. Her first occurred when she was a teenager. She was asleep when her cousin tried to rape her. She told no one about it at the time, except she did talk to her cousin, who felt very, very bad, of course, and she ended up comforting him. Fast forward almost a decade, when Kaur had discovered the toll this event had taken on her body and her problems with intimacy. And this same cousin asked to talk to her. He was upset, you see, because she was dating a man who was not sick. She was disgracing the community. When she arrived at the meeting place, he pointed a rifle at her. And then somehow or another, she turned and walked away. Always waiting for a bullet that mercifully never came. This time, she called the police, and as a result, she lost the support of everyone in her community except her immediate family. She was essentially shunned because she had made trouble for one of their own. But no, she would have told you she felt bad and sad and 1,000 other things, but certainly it wasn't rage, please. Good girls don't allow themselves to be full of rage. Good girls offer compassion. They sacrifice for others. Rage is out of the question here, my friends. The second experience she relates when she was caught up in a now infamous protest in New York City in 2004. The protest occurred during that summer's Republican National Convention held in the city. Kaur had happened to be in town. She agreed to do a favor for a friend and attend a protest in the financial district as a designated legal advisor outfitted with a badge and a camera. The protest had barely begun when police stormed the group, knocking protesters to the ground and slamming them against walls. And the words shouted in her face, "You're under arrest." She had barely looked up at the voice when someone grabbed her arms from behind and her camera shattered on the ground. She protested, of course. She was an observer, not a protester. But by then something was digging into her wrist, the razor cut of plastic cups put very tight. By the time that Kaur was herded into a van, she had begun to lose sensation in her hands. And instead of the normal booking process for protest, where basically you're taken to the station, papers are filled out, you're issued a ticket, and you're on your way, her group was taken to a makeshift detention center on Pier 57 on the Hudson River into a space filled with 10 by 20 cages lined with barbed wire. There was diesel fuel all over the floor. One light white lieutenant seemed to be in charge. At least he was the one who was barking out orders. And at one point, a male detainee asked to have his cuffs replaced since he couldn't feel his hand. Kaur couldn't either, by the way. The lieutenant ordered it done. When a woman detainee, a brown woman, a journalist, also not a protester, asked for help with her cuffs, the lieutenant screamed, "I am not here to make you comfortable." When Kaur asked for help with her cuffs, no feeling in her right hand at all, he walked behind her and he twisted the tight cuffs and he cut them into her veins and then yelled out to everyone, "See, she's just fine." The pain made Kaur black out. She lay in the cage, on and off, present, most of the time oblivious to what was going on. And finally, after, I don't know how many hours, she certainly didn't know, the cuffs were cut off and she was taken to the booking station where she was denied medical attention, denied a lawyer, but photographed, fingerprinted, moved from place to place, chained to other detainees while police officers taunted them. And then she was taken to a filthy group cell. After many more hours, her name was called. She was handed a ticket and deposited outside, where at the door, another white officer pointedly leered at her. Later, she learned she had been detained for 16 hours. Later, she would learn that the New York police had held 1,800 peaceful protesters in this non-police station thing. No one knew where these people had been taken. No one knew how to find them. The presumption of the protesters' lawyers was that the police deliberately stalled the process of booking for the duration of President Bush's presence in New York to give his acceptance speech. Later, the world would learn of this secret detention camp, a place now dubbed Guantanamo on Pier 57, with detainees emerging with all sorts of injuries, including severe rashes caused by the diesel fuel. And later, much later, of course, 9 years of litigation later, the city of New York would be forced to pay $18 million for their actions that week. And still, Valarie Kaur would not have said that she was full of rage. In the immediate aftermath, she had no feeling in her right hand, terrible shoulder pain. 2 years later, her right arm was functionally useless, the pain unrelenting, but of course she didn't feel rage. Finally, a particularly creative therapist helped her confront the two images that haunted her, the face of that sadistic white lieutenant and the face of her cousin. What do you think Kaur discovered? There's no surprise here. She discovered rage. She found that she was full of it, a sort of helpless rage. That's what I would call it. The kind that comes from being abused when you have no way of fighting back, no way of escaping. This rage had been suppressed, and it had tied her body in excruciatingly painful knots. And once she allowed herself with this therapist in this safe place to experience the rage, she discovered something else. In order to feel empathy or compassion, in order to love her abusers as a fellow human beings, she had first to find the rage that debilitated her body and let that rage kill the version of them that she carried within her. And that version of them was a projection of them that was not them as humans, but rather as all-powerful monsters. Valarie Kaur's body finally began to heal. Rage is not the opposite of love. In Kaur's telling, rage may very well be the first thing that must be tended to on the way to revolutionary love. For every human being who has been helpless in the face of someone else's uncontrolled anger, for everyone who has been abused, everyone who has been physically or emotionally taken down, it is probable that rage lurks within their body and mind. And if it remains unacknowledged, it debilitates us. If we are women, we are likely to turn it inward. If we are men, we are likely to turn it outward. Either way is no good. Rage is not the opposite of love, but it certainly can get in the way of love. So confront it, we must. And then what? Then what happens? What if we are able to confront the personal experiences that have enraged us over the years? And unless this group is statistically anomalous, that means that quite a few of us have had those experiences. What if we are lucky enough to be healed as individuals? Does that mean no more rage? I don't think so. And neither does Valarie Kaur. As she writes, the opposite of love is not rage. The opposite of love is indifference. When I read that, I thought, my goodness, she sounds exactly like an Old Testament prophet. She sounds like the Amos we heard in today's reading, the Amos who was walking around the northern kingdom, generally making a nuisance of himself, generally being taunted, being hated, being despised. Somebody or other is going to threaten to kill him because they always do that with Old Testament prophets. And he keeps saying things that no one wants to hear. The Amos who risks the wrath of the people he addresses because he is saying that God demands much more than their casual adherence to the rituals of their faith. Amos speaks for the God who demands that people stop turning a blind eye to the injustice around them, the injustice that their indifference helps to perpetuate. Here's Amos speaking for God. I want to repeat these words because I imagine that Amos, and I won't do that, but I'm tempted to, he's shouting this. This is Amos speaking for God. I despise your festivals. I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals, I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Do you hear it? Amos is full of rage when he thunders those words. But it's a different kind of rage. It's a divine rage that is anger marshaled on the behalf of love. It is a rage that seeks to overturn the indifference of the comfortable. It is the rage of all the Old Testament prophets, and they were always getting death threats because of it. It is the rage of Jesus when he overturns the tables in the temples, and we know what happened next. It's scary because it demands so much. Divine rage demands nothing less than the reordering of the unjust ways of the world. Nothing less. It's necessary rage, and it takes courage to have it. It takes solidarity to have it. My friends, may we be the defenders of God's love. May we be full of rage. Amen.